Names given in childhood have a particular persistence, not because they are true, often because they are not true, and the not-trueness of them requires a constant, exhausting resistance that most people cannot maintain indefinitely. And so the name settles in through sheer repetition, like water finding the lowest point. Miss Edith Calloway had been called the ugly duckling of the Calloway family since she was 9 years old. She had been 9 when the name arrived, delivered by a cousin at a family gathering with the casual cruelty of a child who has noticed a difference and decided to make it a weapon. Her sister Vivian had been 12, already demonstrating the golden hair and the wide eyes and the particular quality of presence that would make her by 17 the most admired girl in Devonshire. Edith had been standing beside her in the garden, brown-haired and serious-faced and entirely unlike her sister, and the cousin had said, "Look at them, Beauty and the ugly duckling." It had been laughed at, not with malice, with the unthinking complicity of people who find an easy observation amusing and do not consider the cost. Edith had heard it. She had been 9 years old, and she had heard it, and she had put it somewhere. Not in the place where things that are dismissed go, but in the place where things that almost ring true go, the place that is harder to clean out. 15 years later, at 24, she had heard variations of it so many times that she no longer entirely separated her own assessment of herself from the assessment that had been handed to her at 9. She knew in the rational part of her mind that she was not ugly. She was not Vivian. She would never be Vivian. Nobody was Vivian. But she was not ugly. She had her father's strong bones and her mother's eyes, which were dark and clear, and in certain lights her best feature. But she did not trust certain lights. She trusted what she had been told, which was, "You are the other one, the less one. The one people look past on the way to your sister." She had managed this with the dignified, quiet efficiency of someone who has accepted a thing they cannot change. She attended the season because her mother required it. She went to the balls and the dinners and the morning calls. She positioned herself at the edges of rooms, which was where she was comfortable, and she watched and she observed, and she told herself that invisibility was not the worst thing. She had told herself this for 3 seasons. Then the Duke of Weston had come to the Alderton ball and looked past every person in the room and found her at the edge, where she had been standing, as usual, trying not to be seen. The Duke of Weston had not wanted to come to the Alderton ball. This was not unusual. He rarely wanted to come to anything. He came because the obligations of his position required it, because the social fabric of England was maintained by the attendance of people who had rather be elsewhere, and the Duke of Weston was powerful enough that his absence was itself a statement, and he had learned to be careful about statements. He came. He stood near the window. He drank wine he did not particularly want, and waited for the evening to reach an acceptable hour. He had been doing this for 2 seasons, with the focused endurance of a man serving a sentence, since his mother had pointed out that the dukedom required an heir, and the heir required a wife, and the wife required at minimum the performance of looking. He had looked. He had found the exercise unrewarding. Not because the women were not lovely, or accomplished, or charming. Many of them were all 3. But there was a quality to the looking that made it impossible. The awareness, on both sides, that he was a duke, and they were candidates. And the whole performance was a kind of audition that both parties pretended was not one. He could not see past it. He had tried and could not. He had been standing at the window for 40 minutes, performing patience, when he saw her. She was at the far edge of the room, near the refreshments, the specific position of someone who has found the best vantage point and the lowest profile simultaneously. She was watching the dancing with the focused, slightly analytical attention of someone who found observation more interesting than participation. He looked at her. She did not look back. She was not looking at him or performing not looking at him. She was simply watching the dancing and thinking about something, and entirely inside her own mind. He found this in a room full of people who were very aware of him, extraordinary. He crossed the room. He stopped beside her. She glanced up, briefly startled, then composing herself with the practiced speed of someone who had learned to manage surprise. She said, "Your Grace." He said, "You are watching the dancing very analytically for someone at a ball." She said, "I'm trying to determine whether the third couple on the left is aware that they are half a beat behind the music, or whether they are doing it deliberately." He said, "Does it matter?" She said, "It matters to my understanding of whether it is a skill problem or a choice." He said, "What is your conclusion?" She said, "Choice. He has been half a beat behind on 3 different pieces. He is doing it to keep her closer." He looked at the couple. He said, "I think you are right." She looked at him, properly, for the first time, with the clear, dark eyes he would come to know very well. She said, "You don't know who I am?" He said, "I know you are observing the room more carefully than anyone else in it." She said, "I am Edith Calloway, Vivian Calloway's sister." She said it the way she always said it, with the specific preemptive quality of someone who has learned to introduce the comparison before other people can. He said, "I don't know Vivian Calloway." She blinked. She said, "Everyone knows Vivian Calloway." He said, "I have been told that I am not paying sufficient attention to the season. It appears to be true." She looked at him for a moment. She said, "Your wine is warm. The cold is at the far end of the table." He said, "I prefer to stand here." She said, "Why?" He said, "Better view." She looked at the room, then back at him. She said, "Of what?" He said, "The dancing, specifically the third couple on the left." A pause. Something happened at the corner of her mouth that was not quite a smile, but was its immediate predecessor. She said, "They are very interesting." He said, "Yes." He stayed beside her for 40 minutes. They did not dance. They watched the dancing and talked about what they saw. The specific, observational conversation of 2 people who were better at watching than performing, and who had found, unexpectedly, a companion in the watching. When he left, when the hour had reached acceptable and he had fulfilled his obligation, he said, "Miss Calloway." She said, "Your Grace." He said, "Next week there is the Pemberton dinner." She said, "Yes." He said, "Will you be there?" She said, with the slight caution of someone not entirely sure what the question was, "I believe so." He said, "Good." He left. She stood at the edge of the room and thought, that was unexpected. She thought, he did not know who Vivian was. She thought this with the specific quality of someone turning an object over in their hands, examining it from angles, trying to determine whether it was what it appeared to be. She thought, he will find out. She thought, and then it will be what it always is. She had been wrong before. She was wrong this time too. He found her at the Pemberton dinner. He had known, he had asked before arriving, who would be present, which was not something he usually did, and had noted Miss Edith Calloway's name on the list. He had noted it with the specific attention of a man who is being honest with himself about what he is doing. He had found her at the far end of the dinner table, seated between a retired general who was mostly deaf and a young man who was mostly interested in his own opinions, which meant she had been talking to neither of them and was sitting with the quiet, practiced patience of someone who had long since made peace with being underserved by seating arrangements. He had redirected the conversation at his end of the table in her direction. He had done it by asking her a question, not a general question, a specific one, about something she had said at the Alderton ball. He had remembered it, the observation about the couple half a beat behind the music, and he had thought of a response to it in the days between and wanted to deliver it. She had looked at him down the length of the table with an expression that contained in equal parts surprise and wariness. She had answered. He had responded. The table had watched. This was noted. He knew it was noted. He had been in London long enough to understand that anything he did was noted, and that doing something twice made it a pattern, and a pattern made it news. He did it anyway. He found her at the Morrison Assembly the following week. He found her at the Whitfield breakfast. He found her at Lord Aldwick's dinner, where she had been placed, again, at the unfashionable end of the table, and where he had asked his hostess, with the polite firmness of a man not accustomed to being declined, to reseat him. Lord Aldwick's wife had reseated him, beside Edith, who had looked at the reseating with the expression of a woman processing something she did not yet have a framework for. She had said, quietly, so only he could hear, "You should not do that." He had said, the seating was wrong. She had said, I am usually at the unfashionable end. He had said, not when I can reseat myself. She had said, people will talk. He had said, people always talk. That is not a reason. She had looked at him. She had said, you know what they call me. He had said no. She had said, yes, you do. You have been at 4 events with me. Someone has told you. He had said, someone told me you were Miss Vivian Calloway's sister, that you were the quieter one. She had said, they did not use those words. He had said, those were the words that mattered to me. She had looked at her plate. He had said, what did they say? She had said, with the flat, careful voice of someone delivering a fact they have practiced not feeling, the ugly duckling of the ton. He had said nothing for a moment. She had said, you see, you know now. He had said, I knew before you told me. Someone told me at the Pemberton dinner. I did not tell you because it was not worth repeating. She looked at him. He said, it is not a description, it is a habit. People make habits of reducing things they do not understand. She said, they have been making that habit for 15 years. He said, yes, and they have been wrong for 15 years. She said, you cannot know that. You have known me for 3 weeks. He said, I know what I have seen in 3 weeks. She said, what have you seen? He said, someone who watches rooms more carefully than anyone in them. Someone who remembers things and connects them. Someone who makes observations that are accurate and specific and delivered without the performance that most people use to make their observations seem more important than they are. He said, someone who introduces herself as her sister's sister before anyone can do it for her, which is not a habit of someone who believes the label, but of someone who is very tired of being surprised by it. The dinner table went on around them. She was very still. She said, "That is a very accurate observation." He said, "I have been paying attention." She said, "Why?" He said, "Because you are worth paying attention to." She looked at her plate again. He let the silence sit. He did not press it. He had learned in 3 weeks that she needed space to process things that surprised her, and that pressing produced the managed, careful version of her rather than the real one. He waited. She said, "You should know that I do not entirely not believe it. The label. I know it is not entirely true. But it has been 15 years, and She stopped. He said, "I know." She said, "You cannot know." He said, "I know that 15 years is long enough for something false to feel true. I know that. And I know that what I think of it does not immediately fix that." He looked at her. He said, "But I am going to keep thinking it. And I am going to keep showing up. And eventually, not today, not this week, but eventually the evidence will accumulate." She said, "Evidence of what?" He said, "Of what I see when I look at you." The dinner continued. She did not speak for a while, but she did not move away, and he thought, that is enough for tonight. He thought, I can be patient. He thought, she is worth every week of it. He kept showing up. This was the thing that she had not prepared for. She had prepared for the interest to fade, for the novelty of her to wear off, for him to find what everyone eventually found, which was that the interesting thing about Edith Calloway was exhausted quickly, and the attention moved on to something brighter. He did not fade. He came to the events where she was, and he found her, and he sat beside her or stood beside her and talked to her with the same specific, focused attention every time. Not the performed attention of someone maintaining a campaign, the genuine attention of someone who is consistently finding the conversation worthwhile. He remembered things. This was the detail that she found most difficult to dismiss. He remembered things she had said 2 events ago and brought them back. He remembered that she preferred the cold wine to the warm, and that she always found the best vantage point in a room, and that she laughed at things that were precisely accurate rather than broadly comic. He remembered, and he brought it back. And the bringing back accumulated. London watched all of this with the fascinated discomfort of a crowd watching something it did not understand and could not stop watching. The Duke of Weston had not shown a sustained interest in anyone in 2 seasons. His pattern had been single conversations, polite non-engagements, the reliable detachment of a man who was present and essentially unavailable. And now he was present and entirely, visibly available, and the object of that availability was Edith Calloway, who was, well. The conversations in the drawing rooms of London went like this. She is not, she is perfectly pleasant, but she is not... And here the sentence always stalled, because the sentence required a completion that could not be delivered without saying the word that everyone had been using for 15 years, and somehow, with the Duke of Weston choosing her week after week in front of everyone, the word had become impossible to say in its old, easy way. He was the most powerful man in England. He did not make mistakes. He did not persist in things that were errors. And he had been persisting for 6 weeks. Lady Alderton said to Lady Pemberton, "Do you think he actually—" Lady Pemberton said, "I think we may have been wrong about the girl." Lady Alderton said, We were not wrong. She is perfectly nice, but she is not. Lady Pemberton said, "The Duke of Weston has found her at 6 consecutive events, and each time he has stayed beside her for the duration. That is a position, not an accident." Lady Alderton was quiet. Lady Pemberton said, "I think we were looking at her wrong." This was the most that Lady Pemberton had ever conceded on any subject, and Lady Alderton knew it. Vivian, when she heard, said to her mother, "Is Edmund Weston courting Edith?" Her mother said, "It appears so." Vivian said, "Good." Her mother said, "Good." Vivian said, "Edith is extraordinary. People have been too stupid to see it for years. I am glad someone is seeing it." Her mother looked at her younger daughter, golden, admired, the uncontested beauty of the family, and said, "You were never jealous of her." Vivian said, "Jealous of what? She is my sister." Her mother said, "People always assumed." Vivian said, "People assume wrong things constantly. That is their habit. Edith is the most interesting person I know. I have always thought so." Her mother sat with this. She thought, "I did not protect her enough." She thought, "I let the name land and did not remove it." She thought, "The Duke of Weston is removing it, week by week, in front of everyone." She thought, "That is more than I managed." She thought, "I am going to do better." She went to find Edith. She found her in the library, which was where Edith always was when she was at home, reading with the focused ease of someone in their natural habitat. She said, "Edith." Edith looked up. Her mother said, "I am sorry. For all of it. For not stopping it when you were 9. For allowing it to continue. For not... I should have said every time that it was wrong. I did not. I am sorry." Edith looked at her mother. She said, "Mamma." Her mother said, "He is not wrong about you. He is seeing what was always there, and I should have been the one seeing it first." Edith said nothing for a moment. Then she said, "I know you love me." Her mother said, "Loving you and protecting you are not the same thing, and I failed at the second." Edith said, "Yes, but you are saying it now." Her mother said, "It should have been said a long time ago." Edith looked at the book in her hands. She said, "He keeps showing up." Her mother said, "I know." She said, "I keep waiting for him to stop." Her mother said, "I do not think he is going to stop." She said, "I do not know what to do with that." Her mother said, "I think you do." She looked at her mother. Her mother looked back with the expression of someone who has made a mistake and knows it and is trying to do the next right thing. Edith said, "I am going to the Carrington ball on Thursday." Her mother said, "I know." She said, "I am going to find the best vantage point." Her mother said, "Yes." She said, "And if he finds me there, I am going to let him." Her mother said, "Good." Edith closed the book. She thought, "Evidence accumulates." She thought, "He said so." She thought, "I am going to let it." She wore the green dress. This was a deliberate choice, deliberate in a way that her dress choices had not previously been. She usually chose the dress that would attract the least notice, which was always the same calculation, and always arrived at the same answer. Something dark, something plain, something that did not invite examination. The green dress was her sister's idea. Vivian had appeared in her room on Thursday morning and sat on the bed and said, "Wear the green one." Edith had said, "It is too—" Vivian had said, "It is exactly right. You have been wearing camouflage for 15 years. Wear the green one." She had worn the green one. It was not a dramatic dress. It was not the kind of dress that announced itself. But it was the colour that was right for her. The dark green that worked with the dark hair and the dark eyes and the strong bones that she had always thought of as a liability and that, she was beginning to understand, were not. She arrived at the Carrington ball. She found the best vantage point. She always found it. She could not help it. It was instinct. And she stood in it and looked at the room and waited. She did not have to wait long. He found her in 11 minutes, which she noted with the specific precision of someone who had been counting. He said, "Green." She said, "My sister's idea." He said, "Your sister has good taste." She said, "Everyone thinks Vivian has good taste." He said, "I mean your sister knows what is right for you. That is a different thing from general taste." She looked at him. He said, "You are wearing the colour that is actually yours instead of the colour that disappears." She said, "You noticed that I usually disappear." He said, "I noticed that you were trying to. I also noticed that you were not succeeding from my perspective, which suggests the camouflage was for other people and not for me." She felt something shift. Not dramatically, not the sudden, total shift of a moment that changes everything. A quieter shift. The specific movement of something that has been held very tightly for a long time being carefully released. She said, "You have been showing up for 7 weeks." He said, "Yes." She said, "Every event, every time." He said, "Yes." She said, "I have been waiting for you to stop." He said, "I know." She said, "Why haven't you?" He looked at her with the clear, direct attention that she had come to know as his most honest expression. The expression without management, the one that arrived when he was saying what he actually meant. He said, "Because every week I find the same thing I found the week before. Someone who sees rooms clearly and thinks carefully and is more interesting than anyone else present and has been told for so long and by so many people that she is less than what she is." He said, "And every week I think, if I show up again and she is still there and she is still herself, then perhaps the accumulation will, perhaps she will begin to trust it." She said, "Trust what?" He said, "What I see." She said, "What do you see?" He said, "Edith. I see Edith, specifically and entirely." The ballroom went on around them, the music and the movement and the performance of 100 people who would talk about this tomorrow, who were probably talking about it now, who had been watching for 7 weeks and had formed their opinions. She did not think about their opinions. For the first time in 15 years, she stood in a room and did not think about their opinions. She thought about 7 weeks of showing up. She thought about the cold wine and the reseating and the thing he had said about 15 years being long enough for something false to feel true. She thought about her mother in the library saying, "I should have been the one seeing it first." She thought, "Evidence accumulates." She said, "Edmund," his given name, which she had not used before. He said, "Yes." She said, "Ask me to dance." He said, "You do not usually dance." She said, "I know. Ask me anyway." He offered her his hand. She took it. They walked onto the floor. The room watched. She did not watch the room. She thought, "I have been at the edge for 15 years. She thought, "I am in the center now." She thought, "It turns out the center is fine." She thought, "It is fine because of who is beside me." He turned her through the first step. She followed. She was, she discovered, a good dancer. She had never known. She had never been asked. He proposed on a Tuesday, not at a ball, not at a dinner, not in any of the settings that proposals usually occupied. He came to call in the morning, properly, with cards, through the front door, received in the drawing room, and sat across from her and said, "I have been thinking about what I want to say, and I have concluded that the only version of it I am comfortable with is the direct version." She said, "Say it." He said, "I love you. I have been in love with you since approximately the 4th event, which was the Whitfield breakfast, when you said something about the way light moved through the east window that was so precise it made me stop entirely and think. That is the person I want to talk to every day for the rest of my life." He said, "I know you have been waiting for me to stop. I want you to stop waiting for that. I am not going to stop. I am going to keep showing up until you believe me. And when you believe me, I am going to keep showing up, because that is the kind of showing up that I intend." She looked at him. She said, "I have heard a name since I was 9 years old." He said, "I know." She said, "I do not entirely not believe it. I told you that." He said, "Yes." She said, "And you are asking me to trust something that contradicts it." He said, "Yes." She said, "That is harder than it sounds." He said, "I know. I am not asking you to have already done it. I am asking you to be willing to keep doing it. Every day. With me." She looked at her hands. She thought about 9 years old, and the cousin, and the garden, and the word that had lodged in the place that was hardest to clean out. She thought about 7 weeks of evidence. She thought about green dresses, and cold wine, and being reseated at dinner, and a man who had found her at the edge of rooms and stayed. She thought, evidence accumulates. She thought, I have been watching it accumulate for 7 weeks, and I am not going to tell myself it is not real. She looked up. She said, yes. He said, yes? She said, yes. With the understanding that I am going to need, that it is not, that some mornings I will wake up and the 9-year-old will be louder than the evidence, and on those mornings I will need you to be patient. He said, I will be patient on those mornings. She said, and I will be honest when they happen, rather than managing them quietly. He said, yes, please. She said, and you will keep showing up. He said, I will always keep showing up. That is the one thing I can promise you with complete certainty. She looked at him. He looked at her. She thought, I wore the green dress. She thought, I let him find me. She thought, I am going to keep letting him. She said, Edmund. He said, yes. She said, the Alderton ball, the first night. You said the view was better beside me. He said, yes. She said, it was a good answer. He said, it was the true answer. That is the same thing. She said, I know. She took his hand. He held it. Outside the drawing-room window, London went about its Tuesday morning, entirely unaware that something had been decided inside a house in Mayfair that would require a significant revision of the story it had been telling about Edith Calloway for 15 years. The revision was coming. It was already underway. The cousin who had said it, the one from the garden at 9 years old, sent a congratulatory letter when the engagement was announced. Edith read it. She put it in the pile of letters that required a response. She wrote back a perfectly pleasant note that said thank you and nothing else. She put the pile away. She thought, he is irrelevant now. She thought, he was always irrelevant. He was 9 years old, and he said a careless thing, and it lodged somewhere it had no business being, and it stayed for 15 years, and now it is leaving. She thought, it is leaving slowly, which is how things that have been there a long time leave, not all at once, by degrees. She thought, that is all right. Edmund had been right about the mornings. There were mornings, fewer now than in the first months, but still present, still arriving without warning, when she woke up and the 9-year-old was louder than everything else, and the mirror was the enemy, and the green dress stayed in the wardrobe. On those mornings, she told him. She had made herself a promise, and she kept it. She told him when it happened, instead of managing it quietly, and he was patient in exactly the way he had said he would be. Not with the anxious, performative patience of someone trying to fix a thing, with the steady, present patience of someone who was simply there. He made coffee. He sat beside her. He did not try to argue her out of it. He waited. The mornings always passed. They passed faster now than they had at the beginning, which was the evidence accumulating in a new form. The evidence that the 9-year-old had less ground than she used to, that 15 years was not an immovable weight, but a weight that could, with time and truth and the consistent presence of someone who saw clearly, be reduced. Not to nothing. She was honest about that. It would not reduce to nothing. 9-year-old voices were not fully silenced. They were managed, which was a different and more sustainable goal. She managed it. She was very good at managing things. The season had been different. She had walked into rooms differently. Not with the performed confidence of someone who had decided to pretend, but with the specific, quiet confidence of someone who knew that the person beside her knew who she was and had chosen her anyway, and would find her again if she ended up at the edge. She had ended up at the edge less. She had found that the centre was, as she had discovered at the Carrington ball, fine. It was fine because of who was beside her, and it was also, increasingly, fine on its own terms, because the confidence that came from being known tended to make itself available beyond the knowing, to carry forward into rooms where Edmund was not present, to become, gradually and incompletely and imperfectly, something she was growing into rather than something she was performing. She was not the ugly duckling. She had never been the ugly duckling. She was Edith Calloway, dark-haired and clear-eyed, and possessed of the most accurate observational gaze in any room she entered. And she had been at the edge for 15 years, and had come to the centre at 24, and had found that the centre had always had room for her. It had been waiting. She had simply needed someone to show her where it was. Edmund came into the library. Her library now. Their library. The room she had claimed in the first week as her room, and that he had not disputed, because he understood what rooms meant to her. He said, "The Alderton ball, tonight." She said, "I know." He said, "I have been told I am expected to actually dance this year, rather than standing by the window." She said, "You danced last year." He said, "Once. You asked me." She said, "I will ask you again." He said, "I know. I will spend the first 40 minutes standing by the window anyway." She said, "I know. I will find you there." He said, "Yes." She looked up from her book. He was looking at her with the expression she knew better than any other. The clear, specific, unmanaged warmth of a man who was paying attention to the thing in front of him and finding it, still, exactly what he had found at the beginning. She thought, he keeps showing up. She thought, that was what he promised. She thought, he has kept every promise. She closed the book. She said, "The green dress." He said, "Yes." She said, "I was going to wear the blue." He said, "Wear what you want." She said, "I want to wear the green." He said, "Then wear the green." She smiled. He smiled. The Alderton ball was in 3 hours. She was going to find the best vantage point. He was going to find her there. That was how it went, and how it would go, and how it was always going to go. Every time, without fail. Showing up.